We now have Javed Rana, who's joining us from the Pakistani capital. Javed, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Javed, we were just discussing the arrest of Istanbul Mayor Imamoglu, and a similar case we have been seeing in France as well with Marine Le Pen, whose National Rally Party has been accused of embezzling EU funds. So what's the latest? What are the latest developments from France?
I think we have to see again a very broader picture, because it's not a case which is only restricted to France. We see a trend in Europe where far-right political parties are gaining grounds. And in a similar fashion, we have also seen, I would bracket Donald Trump's Republican, they now have also become a far-right because they're also pursuing an evangelical extremist agenda. I think in a similar fashion, we have to see it in a manner that actually gave a broader picture on how the attacks on the Muslim countries are also very much linked with the domestic political scene in the Europe. There is a large number of people, they run into millions, who are migrating from Asia, from Asian Muslim countries to the Europe, particularly in France, in Germany. And then obviously this is creating some kind of a imbalance in population. That is one part of the picture. But the bigger part of the picture is something which is the least debated, which is the least talked about. We have to see the Pew, which is a survey report 2019, and there have also been domestic investigations and surveys in France, which suggest that these statistics really differ from one report to another report. But I think I would like to here quote Pew, which is American surveyor. They are saying that there is a nearly 100,000 French citizens who've been converting into Islam. That's a rough estimate. Now, that has been a lingering source of concern for the far-right extremist political parties. And they've been telling to their public that these Muslims, their population is growing as compared to the non-Muslims in France. And sooner or later, they are going to take over entire France. That is a Islamophobia, xenophobia. They are creating, and they have successfully created, and that is why in the last year's parliamentary elections, the far-right political parties have gained huge vote, and that is a clear threat to these secular political parties. So they prosecuted Le Pen, and then I have seen some of the prosecution case that does suggest that she did misappropriated European Union's fund, and those landed in paying the salaries of her personal staff. So as a result of this misappropriation and corruption, she was convicted and she was banned to contest election for next 5 years, which means that she cannot contest coming presidential elections after a couple of years. And that is going to give an edge to the secular political parties. Now, her party, this so-called National Rally, they are exploiting this situation in a manner that is not very different to what Donald Trump did during his presidential campaign. They're telling them that they are being sidelined deliberately because they are highlighting those causes which the secular political parties are concealing from the public. And that is obviously because the people, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people, they've been migrating into Europe, including France. And there is a Islamophobic fear that that day is not far when Muslims will take over the entire Europe, including France. And according to Pew survey report, by 2050, Muslims would be the biggest majority in Europe. So because that report has caused ripples within the ranks and files of the extremist segment of European society. And that is why we have seen more Islamophobic wave in Germany, more particularly, and then specifically in France. In Britain, the conversion rate is relatively not that big. Around 5,000 people have been converting every year. But overall, these are the 70% among them are women. Now we have to see the European culture. They have the money, they have the all luxurious style of the life, but they don't have a peace of mind. Somehow or the other, they believe that Islam, by converting to Islam, their psychological problem have been subsiding. This is a very core part of the problem, because of which this conversion to Islam has been taking place. And then we have to also be very realistic, and European Union will have to be very realistic. The people who are migrating to Europe, or they want to migrate to the USA, why they are migrating? Because you are bombing them. Americans, the Europeans, they are behind attacking Muslim countries in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, and I would say even in the Palestine, in the occupied Palestinian territory, Lebanon, because they are backing apartheid state Israel with their weapons, with their technology, with their drones, with their manpower. Now, Europe itself is at the core of the problem. Now, here comes the bigger historical debate. European authors have written over the course of decades very nonsensical, misleading books against Islam, a very misleading literature, where the very context of which and crux of which is that Islam had spread by sword, by force. May I ask them now why people in Europe are converting to Islam? Is it by force of sword? You've been banning Muslim hijab. You've been putting a lot of restrictions on Muslims' masajid, the mosque. Nonetheless, people are converting. In USA, alone in jails, I'm not talking about the other statistics, alone in US jails, 35,000 Americans have been converting to Islam. Now, are they being converted by use of force? So again, Europe need to think about it. The Americans need to think about it. Donald Trump himself has been Islamic phobic. His defense secretary has been Islamic phobic. He's been talking about setting up a third temple in the East Jerusalem, what and what not. But what they are not looking at it, that if there is a surge in immigration, what is the reason? Reasons are your bombs. Reasons are your wars. They have killed millions of people in the Muslim countries. If you look over a period of for last several decades, they are at the source of the problem of the immigrations from Asia to Europe. Because again, I have to say time and again, they are killing people. They are causing a widespread economic disparity in the Muslim countries. They have lost their sources of income when because at the expense of their war economy, the economy of the Muslim countries have enormously suffered. And Turkey itself has been victim of that refugee crisis coming from the Syria. Turkey hosted 5 million Syrians over the period of last couple of years, for last 13 years. What is the reason? These are the Americans' wars. These are the Americans' wars in the Middle East. So this is a bigger picture that is not being looked at, and that is why Muslims in the Europe continue to suffer. The growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geo-strategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geo-strategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.